Acts chapter 13, it really starts at verse 16 is where we're at. Okay. As a running start reminder, somebody made the silly mistake of asking Paul to give an account of why they do what they do. And so that silly mistake led to Paul giving one of the first preaching things from Paul on the Sabbath here. And that's where we pick up at 16 when they, people have asked him to come and preach, right? And so in 16, he starts off with, in the middle of 16, men of Israel and you who fear God, listen. And we talked about men who fear God, that this wasn't just Jewish people, even though they were in the synagogue, that this was more than just Jewish people that were there, because even non-Jews were allowed in areas, more public area kind of stuff. But these are more than just passerbyers. These are people that, at the very least, had some sense that there was a God. Very least that they believed in some higher power type of thing here. And so, 17, the God of this people, Israel, chose our fathers and made the people great during their stay in the land of Egypt, and with an uplifted arm he led them out of it. So, Paul, right at the very beginning, talks about the God of this people, Israel, chose our fathers. So what does he mean by that?
When we said fathers, he's talking about the Israeli line.
That's right.
That they're the chosen people.
Correct. Yeah. And that it was God that chose who they would be. Right? Not only just the people in general, but chose our fathers.
Yeah.
Right? Put into plan, put into motion, kind of a thing. Not just a, and then this happened, right? God started it, but this is the randomness that occurred. It wasn't like that. There's a plan and a purpose, and that's what Paul is starting off with. Is there's an intent in everything that we're reading here. There's some intentionality, because if you look at not only verse 17, you look at 19 at the beginning, and when he had destroyed. If you look at 22, and after he removed them, you start to get a sense on all the beginning of all these verses, and God did this. Right. It wasn't, well, God had no choice but had to do this. Oops, we didn't account for that. This had to happen to compensate. None of that. There was a plan, and throughout all of these verses that you read through here, you see this intentionality of the history that's going on here. He made the people great during their stay in the land of Egypt, right? That was, they prospered. I think we remember that. So much so that the Egyptians started to fear the people of Israel, because unless they become too numerous, we may just vanish away, which is an interesting thing why that did not happen. Why not just pick Egypt as
from God's standpoint?
For God's standpoint, or here's from a pragmatic standpoint. Egypt had lots of natural resources. It was, when you say Egypt, often we think desert and we think pyramid, but that is not what Egypt is like at all. It was a very fertile area, very, very much so. And it had great access points through the seas and even the rivers, everything. It was great resources. Why not pick?
It was the center of knowledge at that
Exactly.
area.
I mean, it was the powerhouse.
Because that's not how God works.
Yeah. Well,
He uses the weak to confound the strong,
yeah.
so that there is no doubt who's doing what he's
Who's doing what.
which is exactly what Paul is saying here. This is a God thing. It's not a man thing. And so he go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's a good guy.
But he chose a people who were not a people, and plucked them out,
Right.
you know.
They were nothing, right?
They were basically herdsmen, they
Right.
were, you know, nomads,
Basically, what, 13 people?
right,
You know, at the start of something
and a
like that?
bunch of sheep,
Yeah,
cattle.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the
Right.
fathers, his father.
right, that, the wives, and maybe their children, that was it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you go to Deuteronomy 32, again, we gotta, like you said, it's a God thing. Why did God do all of this? He started from the beginning. It was all about the Messiah. It's all about salvation of mankind. It was all about Him picking out a people as His inheritance because, again, why not Egypt? Well, look at Egypt. Egypt was very paganistic. They had a God for everything. That's what, and God said, no, I'm going to separate. You're going to be my specialty. You're not going to be like the rest of the people around you. I'm going to give you this land. We're going to start from scratch here just for you. I think it all has to do, we got to remember, it all has to do about pagan, all about salvation, all about what's going around them. To me, we got to, don't lose fact, there was a lot of pagan religions around them. And I think, again, He says, I picked you because of my promise I made to Abraham. We were not on the list. You, and read 32 Deuteronomy, you will be my inheritance. God says, I'm choosing you as my, you're not choosing me.
right.
I'm choosing you, and I'm going to put you here. And you're going to get it. And that's why He kicked, like we just saw about kicking out, you're going to read it next. I'm going to kick out all these people. Who He kicked out? All the pagans. Get out of here. This is my people's land.
I think at the point that He had chosen Abraham, I mean, the world had gone from what we saw in the Garden of Eden to basically a pagan world. You know, I mean, it had,
2,000 years, I'm gonna
yeah,
start over now, but
it
have
had
a people
evolved.
from me, and I'm
That's right.
I'm a powerful people.
Right.
Tower of Babel.
Right, exactly.
Look where they progress, and what do? God says, go out and populate, tells Adam and Eve that. Look at Tower of Babel. We're not going to do that. We're going to stay right here, and we're going to make a ziggurat to reach you. And God says, oh, real? And again, it's just like we're saying, all this is all about what we're talking about. It's chaos.
Yeah.
And God says, I don't want chaos. Y'all not listening to me. All right, now I'm going to take over. And that's when, bottom line, that's when Abraham and all this came in. God steps in and says, okay, I'm going to take care of this once and for all.
But He knew it beforehand.
Oh, don't.
It's all part of the covenant with Abraham. And I will give you to you and to your offsprings after you the land of your sojourners, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So the whole plan was to not be in Egypt, to go back to Canaan.
So Paul's reminding them of this, as well as telling those who fear God, right? So he's both audience there. He's reminding them of this. They knew this, right? I mean, this is their history, what they were brought up with. All of their little Sunday school classes, had music, songs, and rhymes about how God brought them through all of this here. So it's a strong reminder. He says, and with an uplifted arm, He led them out from it. It's not God's uplifted arm. Whose uplifted arm was it?
Well,
We-
Moses is one.
It was Moses,
case,
right,
yeah.
right,
There's a couple times.
right,
Red Sea, the Jericho, Battle of Jericho,
Right.
there's a few times where
right,
the uplifted arm.
right. And I don't think Paul was misspeaking here. I don't think he was thinking that. I think they all knew that Moses was under the operation of God,
Yeah.
right? So it is in fact God doing that. So not to be.
There's a lot of idioms in the Bible, and people need to understand.
Whoa! Who are you calling an idiot?
People say, I'm going to take the Bible literally. Be careful what you say, because this is a
Correct.
great one. I
Right.
love it when you said it.
Yeah.
No, but come on. Yes, but it's an idiom because God was using Moses.
Yes.
And that
Right.
was just an example.
Right,
to show
exactly.
Exactly how it works.
Mhm.
Yes.
Let's see, and he led them out from it. 18. And for a period of about 40 years, He put up with them in the wilderness. I just love that phrase. He put up with them. I kind of think of when I'm raising my kids,
Amen.
and I put up with them.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
I can relate to that after this last week.
Mhm.
Great. Here, I wonder if he just put a dramatic pause and just looked around. This is God putting up with you guys right here. This is it here. In the wilderness, so he's recounting that story. And when he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, He distributed their land as an inheritance, all of which took about 450 years. So, I mean, it's a short recap of a lot of the story of the Bible there. I mean, he did it in a sentence, basically, in recapping here. But I am a little raised eyebrow about he distributed their land as an inheritance. What do you think he's
One
meaning
says by a lot.
by allotment? Okay.
Well, it had to do with the tribes, right? It had to do with the 12 tribes.
Right.
And so he distributed, he gave Moses the,
You want to say no, don't you?
no, but he gave Moses the instructions on how the land was going to be distributed, right? And, it all had to do with size of the
Right. So
tribe.
the understanding here is not necessarily about distributed as in this is yours, but this is yours to run.
Yeah.
This is yours to manage
By assignment almost.
by assignment,
Mhm.
right? And that's the concept here is that this was all God's land in the first place, and this is not your birthright, but rather directed by God.
Yeah.
Okay, which I think is a total different mindset about I'm special because I was told I was special, so therefore it's mine. Kind of thing, and that kind of an attitude, like the generation of today. 450 years. So what's the timing on that? Is that all the way up from God chose the people of Israel to this point was 450 years? Is that about right? Or were they talking just in the land of Canaan? Took 450 years.
And after, well, according to mine, verse in 20 says, well, not in, but after that, he gave them judges for about 450 years until Samuel the prophet.
Really?
Say, really?
Yeah.
Mine doesn't say that.
Mine-
Verse 21 says that.
What are you else?
It
Okay,
said-
let me start it.
Read 19 and 20.
I'll read 19 and 20 again on mine. It says, and when he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he distributed their land as an inheritance, all of which took about 450 years.
Mine didn't say that.
20. And after these things, he gave them judges until Samuel the prophet.
Yeah. Ours-
And read yours now?
No, mine says, and he went and destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan. He distributed their land to them by allotment, period. After that, he gave them judges for about 450 years,
Wow,
till Samuel the prophet.
that's a big difference.
That's a big
I don't have to say too much here.
Other than the way the 450 is in there, allotment versus inheritance, I don't know if that triggers anything different.
I
But
think
this is why I
think
think
it's
the
semantics.
judges, well, it says, it applies, the judges were there for 450 years.
Yes.
And that was after he kicked them out of kicked the other people out of Canaan.
Until Samuel walked in.
And then saying between the time they were given the land
Yeah.
to Samuel.
I would say that would have to be it, because you're right, because if you look at, because you came out of Egypt and Joshua took over, you had 40 years, I don't think it was 450 years between Joshua and then kicking out of Canaan, the 7 nations. I think it's probably gonna be, after that, then he ruled for 450 years until Samuel the prophet. That's what I would say, because I don't think it took 450 years, if I'm not correct. If you go back to the timeline, Joshua and his wars did within his lifetime, so it couldn't have been 450 years.
Google it.
I'm
Not
gonna look at it. I didn't even know there was a Greek Bible at the house. That'll tell you exactly.
Right.
And I'll go ahead and look at it.
So,
I'll send y'all
by the way,
that.
this now exposes a problem with putting verses in the Bible, putting numbers on Scripture. Because we automatically assume that it is scriptural 1920 as 2 separate units.
Right.
In
Right.
reality, it's not. It's a long text that they arbitrarily assigned a number pointing to.
Yeah.
It's just an index, if you will.
So they can go straight to it.
So you can go, so everyone can reference it. So this is a caution to Howard, if nothing else, that 19 does not follow 20 just because it's got that. This was translated
Yeah.
as a group of a large text, right? So
Exactly.
What was that? Started where it says, inheritance dash,
Uh-huh.
then said it was,
It's almost a parenthetical. It says, after the dash, it says, all of which took about 450
Yeah.
all
years.
of which, okay, so it does say that what he just said.
Yeah,
Not
So
going
it's,
forward.
this is reading, the way that ours is reading is that it took 450 years for them to
Right.
distribute the land.
right.
Right. But it couldn't have, because I think Joshua did it within his lifetime, and he
Yeah.
did it 450 years, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. All those battles were done
Yeah.
by the time he died.
What translation y'all reading?
New American Standard for mine.
Mine's the New King James.
Yeah, mine's the New American Standard.
What's yours?
New,
King James.
New King James. Let's see,
ESV.
ESV.
What is yours, he said?
Mine, it says, all this took about 450 years, and after that he gave them the judges. I'm seeing the 450 years from further back, the people
Egypt.
making them great in the land of Egypt, all the
Yes.
way through the distribution of the land in Canaan. That is 450 years.
Yeah, now that's yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is that whole section.
well, ours has American Standard, so it's gotta be right.
Yeah, but mine said but King James in the version, you know that's right.
That's English, so it
Yeah,
probably
but
doesn't.
King
the
James
American
is
version
the
is better.
translation, you know that.
Okay.
There is only one translation. Greek and Hebrew is irrelevant.
If there was a Republican,
That's right.
American Republican.
Republican Standard,
yeah,
right.
that'd be
Yeah, but also,
better.
It's called the Republican Open
Psalms
Bible here.
82.
Yeah,
well,
different.
It was different, and that's why the ESV is a very good one too, because it kind of comes in with the Dead Sea Scrolls found. They kind of implemented some of the things that they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that didn't line up. And look, is it changing them? No.
No,
it's
it doesn't
not.
change anything.
The meaning's still there.
Yeah.
That's why I think that's what even the scholars will tell you. Listen, as long as you got to make sure it's peer reviewed.
Right.
A whole bunch of people. And he said, but each one has some good qualities.
Right.
That's actually ESV that says pretty good. The King James, New King James is good.
Yeah, put it on.
And there's another one they say they recommend, but you're right.
International is what I used for decades.
Yeah. Well, this one would be an easy one to figure out. All you gotta do is look at, his
Yeah.
historical
yeah,
timeline, so.
Yeah.
That'll, you know what you do? You go, I got an interlinear Greek Bible, so it's
Right.
Greek, and it'll be exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go look at it.
Right.
You said yours says something about an allotment instead of inheritance. As a difference in Joshua, it says that their inheritance was by lot, just as the Lord commanded.
Inheritance by lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it was which tract of land you got is the way I'm reading that. That was by a lot.
I wonder if they meant by physical pieces of property. However, you get that on that side of the sidewalk, I get this on this side of the sidewalk, as opposed to 50-50 split. or
Yeah, I
whatever.
do think so. Yeah, I think
Why? Think about that, because you're right, you hit it, okay, not 12 tribes now, remember, you had 12, but only 11 got land. Why would God say, okay, here's the boundaries?
Well, they were,
What would
but
they
each
do
tribe
between
had a
each
different
other?
function.
Oh, yes.
That's
Oh, no, they'll fight each other
They'll
for
fight
land,
each
which
other.
they did.
Right.
You know what a Jewish person told me? The only reason why we're still alive is we got the Muslims. He says, we would have killed ourselves off. Seriously, Ralph told me that.
Oh, did he
said,
really?
Yeah, he said, the only reason why we're still here is we got the Muslims. And he was paraphrasing, he said, because we would kill ourselves amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
to. Here's the boundaries, because you know what's going to, and look what happened when they split the kingdom. That's what was going on.
They were fighting against each other,
Yes,
they
they
were
were.
against each
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Can't we all just-
So that was pretty easy.
Yeah, well, why can't we all just get along?
We get songs or something.
Oh, God.
And so in 20, ultimately, he gave them the judges until Samuel the prophet. I had a lot of commentary about the judges and
You didn't have a commentary on just getting through that verse, though.
okay. To me, the judges period was a bad period.
I love it, though. It's good reading.
Yeah, it is, and there was a constant up and success fail, success fail, success fail. I mean, it really kind of models our lives.
Amen.
It really
Amen.
does.
But that's what they had said, that the judges were a time when it was leaderless to a certain degree society. They had judges, but they weren't the kings necessarily that ruled.
No, there was no kings yet.
That's what I mean.
And you know what? And that's what was so cool, because I'm alluding to what y'all going to. You know, if you think about the judges period, that was God telling them, you will live by faith. in a sense, because they are a representation of me, and it's all about faith. When the kings came in, really the faith is gone in a sense. Now,
Right.
this is my leader, I'm gonna listen
Right.
to him. And then someone else will talk, but the judges, I thought, was, God says, I want to set, you're not gonna be like those people, you don't need a king, you're gonna come to me, and my judges are gonna be around to help you understand what I'm saying.
And protect you and
Yes,
everything else.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And that wasn't good enough, they didn't have enough faith, they wanted a king.
Which led them to a very dark period
Yes, sir,
with the kings.
yes.
He said, okay, I'll give you a king. Now, if you're king and you, I'll keep my statutes and it'll go well with you. But if you don't,
Yeah,
and they didn't, you know, yeah.
exactly.
But if you don't,
The 21, and then he asked, as Frank was saying, they asked for a king, and God gave them Saul, and he names the son of Kish. I'm not sure why he needed to include which Saul, unless here's Saul, aka Paul, and he was trying to keep it clear on which Saul we were talking of. I wouldn't have thought so, but
Probably references back to when he was anointed king. He's
Right.
probably called Saul, son of
Kish.
That's exactly,
Yeah.
that's what that was their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they
They didn't have a last name per se.
Exactly, your son, that's exactly what it is, that's their
Yeah.
culture, where they describe you.
Right. God gave them a man of the tribe of Benjamin for 40 years. I don't know if you know much about the tribe of Benjamin and their notoriety, but
I love it, notoriety.
they were
That's the way of putting it.
least of the tribes.
Yes,
Maybe I
yes,
should
yes.
say it that way. As a
And
matter
they
of fact,
deserved it.
as a matter of fact, I think technically speaking, in bloodline, the Benjamin tribe expired out.
Really?
I think if I remember right, somebody was like assigned to be the Benjamin tribe
Hmm.
after
Oh,
all of
okay.
them had got killed out by their other tribes. It's something like that. There's a backstory of Benjamin and
Really?
how they got a reset, if you will. So it's a very fascinating
That is fascinating.
side story there.
Mm.
And I don't remember much of it. Just that it's like that's odd.
It is.
For 40 years. 22. And after he had removed him, and by the way, don't want to get lost in all this context, it's and after God had removed them, not
Right.
he being Saul or any of the other people here.
Capital H.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The big he. He removed him. He raised up David to be their king, concerning whom he also testified. I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all my will. So why did Paul put this in? Other than why did he add this extra commentary? He put a commentary about Saul, no commentary about Saul, but did put this commentary about David in here. You're trying to recap history. Why would you?
Well, unless he's just trying
Spotlight.
to accentuate that he was chosen by God, as opposed to just the next guy in line, or the guy who happened to be there, or the guy who stabbed Saul. That was very common in those days for people to inside the court, so to speak, to try to take over. So I think he was just saying, "Oh, by the way, he's got the seal of approval. God picked him specifically."
Okay.
Also,
Go ahead.
tribe of what? Who has David always been a shadow of? The Messiah. Tribe of Judah. I think there's a lot of picture there. Picturesque. It was a foreshadowing of the Messiah coming.
Yeah.
Because it was from the tribe of Judah, which, where was Saul from? Benjamin.
and they always picked one. You're the child of promise, you're not. All the way through, he was
Right.
Mm-hmm.
leading up to it.
And this is the great king, right? This is the one when Israel thought of the great king. They all went back to David.
Mm-hmm.
You see when even references, the Jews when they're talking to Jesus a lot of time will reference, David. So he is the great king. So
What's the one attribute in this scripture about David? There's an attribute given to him.
he's a man after my heart.
And more?
He
More
does
than
all
that?
Do my will, all my will.
Right. Right. It's kind of a tie-in here. You're after God's heart when you do His will,
Mm.
When you do his will, you're after his heart,
Yeah.
because your will is his will.
Yeah, the main after the heart, I was not a literal thing, that's an idiom, if
It's,
you will.
it's a seat of the soul.
And it's not saying that David's perfect, and we see David made a lot of mistakes, but
Right.
like us, God's will is for all mankind to be saved. If we go to, I think it's John chapter 3, I'm not sure. But is that true? It's true, but all men saved? No. But doesn't make his will null and void.
Right.
You see, that's the same thing as what you said. People look at David, David was far from perfect, but his heart was pure with God, because he did live by faith with God.
I think of your children, going back to your children example, is there's some children that you're always after, you're trying to keep them out of the street, keep them out of trouble, shut up, be quiet, all this sort of stuff. And then there's the one that's always helpful, always,
That's a good,
that's the one that's
yeah.
after your heart, is the one
Yeah.
that's always there, being a good boy. I'm not saying he's perfect, but
He
he's
makes
a good boy.
mistakes, I love it, that's a good.
And instead of like,
yeah.
come on out on the street, come on this side where I can see you, okay, Dad, as opposed to taking off, So it's that
I like that.
wanting to please, that's a better way of saying it, wanting to please him
Yeah.
in everything he does, doesn't mean he is
Yeah.
knowing what his dad wants all the time, but he's wanting to please his dad. So his dad says, hey, come here, he comes running.
Yeah, I think the other thing too with David, when I think about that man after God's own heart, is though even though David was a sinful man, whenever his sin found him out, what was the first thing he did? He repented.
Yeah.
He didn't try to hide it. He didn't try to run to witches. He didn't try to do. He basically said, "I'm sinful. I'll come to you asking forgiveness." And in that way, that's what God's heart. God is looking for a repenting heart.
Right.
And I think that's what that's why God separated in the way that that He did, and why He was as prominent as what He was. Not perfect, but understood His imperfections.
That's a good one. I like a heart, and I like the way you said it, because a child's heart, with just the greats, put them two
Yeah.
together. It's funny how God uses that to describe his relationship with us.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like both.
And I think, and I like the way you said that as soon as it was revealed to him that he was doing wrong, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
He immediately laid it on the altar.
Yeah. Think about when Nathan confronts him, right?
Yeah.
And Nathan says, "You are that man," right? And what is the first thing David says? He doesn't go, wait a minute. You
I'm
don't
king."
understand.
Yeah.
I'm the king.
What about you?
I can take what I want. He doesn't do that. The
No.
first thing he does
That's right.
is he repents,
Or agrees with God.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're right, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And he did what I love it. Who was Nathan? That was God's representation on
Yeah,
earth.
absolutely.
And he said, and he respected Nathan, which respected God's authority. I love it. He said, oh yeah, I screwed up, man.
Yep.
We need to stop here.